4 years into the Syrian civil war, all these people started to go to Europe, and we saw pictures of it and people dying in the oceans and babies being carried to safety or dying. Why then? It seemed to come right out of the blue. Why after 4 years? So there's a few reasons. First, at that point in the war, it really started to look like there was not going to be peace anytime soon. The so-called Islamic State was on the rise. Its brutality eclipsed anything we had seen. The Syrians that went to Europe are generally those that are middle class, and they did not want to live in a state that was ruled by Islamist forces. At the same time, Turkey was talking about a safe haven, a safe zone for Syrians in the south. The rumor going around was that Turkey was going to force Syrians within Turkey into this area that would be a so-called safe zone. Well, Syrians did not want to be hounded into a place that had no protection, and they were a bit aware of what happened earlier in such types of situations, where it became a focal point for violence. Added to that, the war had been going on for a couple years. Many of these Syrians had been in Turkey for 2 to 3 years. Their savings were exhausted. They didn't have any more money, or not much more left. And they wanted a future. Turkey started to become a little unstable inside. Its internal war with the Kurds started to heat up. Some Syrians started to wonder, well, if Turkey can't make peace with these people who had been here all this time, how are they going to welcome us? At the same time, Germany decided for its own reasons that it would no longer abide by the Dublin Regulation. The Dublin Regulation stated that any refugee landing in a European country had to apply for asylum in the country where they landed and stay there until that claim was processed. So they couldn't move around and just decide what country. That meant if you were coming by sea and you didn't have a visa to land by plane, you had to go to Spain, Italy, or Greece pretty much. These are not countries with great economies. So when Germany said it would not abide by the Dublin Regulation, people could land in Greece and then go to Germany and apply. And that's what they wanted to do. They wanted to work. And Germany had a huge economy that could support them. In fact, earlier Germany had been encouraging Syrian doctors to come to Germany and had a program where they would pair them with a German doctor and get them up to speed on German particular techniques and then have them work in rural areas because Germany has need of rural doctors. So people wanted to go and work somewhere. And Greece was not the best place to go work with their employment problems. When the Dublin Regulation was bypassed and Germany would not abide by the Dublin Regulation any longer, Syrians could land in Greece and then go wherever they wanted. And that was a pull mechanism. So there were both pull and push mechanisms for Syrians to go. By and large, the Syrians who went were educated, more educated than the general Syrian population, and middle class. These were people who had some types of skills that they thought would work in an industrialized Western economy. Now, when people move across borders, they use smugglers often. Smuggler is a person that transports someone who wants to go across borders. A trafficker is someone who transports a person that does not want to be transported, kidnaps them basically. There's a huge distinction. So many of the Syrians used smugglers. And smuggling has effects on the economy of the place it starts and all the places along the route that create non-traditional security threats for the country. long-term, non-immediate threats that are not military. So in order to smuggle, you need to have border guards that are compromised and that can be bribed. The harder those borders are to cross, the more expensive you're going to have to bribe those border guards. The more threat there is to those border guards by the country, so the harder they make it to cross over a border, the more that border guard is going to be beholden to the criminal network. A smuggler isn't just one person. They have guards. They also have to have a place to store people before they transport them. That means landlords get involved with property. So you use many different segments of the population. Fraud. You create or use the industry for counterfeiting, to counterfeit IDs, or whatever else you need to get across borders. Each of these industries gets enriched, and human smuggling is more profitable than almost any other industry. High, expensive drugs and intricate arms would be some of the only industries that could create the type of profit that human smuggling does, or human trafficking, for that matter. So when human smuggling then dies down, it leaves an effect on the country. The smugglers and the guards and everyone in their pay don't just say, oh well, the profit's over, let's go home and do something else. They try to switch to another industry that's almost as profitable or as profitable. So they use that network that already exists to get into drugs or human trafficking or smuggling of military technology and military arms. Anything that can bring the same amount or close to it of profits. That's a very long-term danger for a country. You've left border guards that are vulnerable to bribes and now on the hook to these criminal agencies. You do not want that. The Syrians aren't the first refugee wave of the 21st century, but they really are the first 21st century refugees, in the sense that they're the first ones to steer their own fate more than any other refugees in history. Upper-class refugees have always been able to figure their way or go to another country. But most refugees are subject to where they can walk to, where they can swim to, take a boat to, smugglers on the border. And usually, smugglers take their fee up front, take all of it. And then you just hope that they get you to the place that you're supposed to go. The Syrians have changed things up, using information technology and cell phones and diverse apps that effectively allow them to hold their money in escrow. They portion their money by steps in the trip and only release it to the smuggler when they get to their next destination. So when you see Syrians taking selfies on a Greek shore, that's proof of life. And that then the money gets released to the smuggler, that they have safely arrived. It is not in any way vain or selfish, generally. This is them saying, okay, you can get paid now. I've arrived and I'm alive. So using information technology, they've steered their own journey. They've used apps to translate, maps, closed Facebook pages that tell them where people are going to ambush them along the road. We see Syrians saying, 10 minutes into this journey, there's guys with knives that are going to come out and ambush you. And people more prepared and more knowledgeable than any other refugee group in history. It doesn't mean it's been easy for them. Just relatively speaking to the absolute vulnerability of other refugee groups, they have been less vulnerable. This is the middle class ones with IT skills, and some language skills and knowledge, able to access these social media platforms and other translation apps, maps apps, navigation apps. So we see that Syrians get criticized for having a smartphone, for prioritizing a smartphone over food. And people say, oh, they must be rich, they just care about their cell phone, they don't care about food. No, the cell phone is their way to get everything else. Without a cell phone, they're not going to make it. Food is sort of like the give a person a fish and they'll eat for a day. Teach them to fish and they'll eat for a lifetime. The cell phone is the lifetime. And giving them food, so they say, well, so I miss a meal. But the cell phone is going to allow me to find my way in whatever country I am, to hook up with other Syrians, to network my way into what kind of tent I should buy, where I should stay when I arrive, what authorities I should speak to. How do I file this application? All kinds of knowledge that the UN has been trying to disseminate for years to refugees that now they're disseminating amongst themselves. There are some downsides to all this use of IT, however. Smugglers also use IT. They advertise on closed Facebook pages saying, oh, well, children under 8 are free, or come with me, I'll give you a discount. And there's no way to tell in social media. We know rumors spread. There's no way to tell what's true and what's false. So that's one thing. Another thing is that other refugees that don't have the IT skills or knowledge or Facebook pages, they see the Syrian success. And it's a pull factor. They then think, oh, it's that easy for me to go. And they don't realize, like most people don't know, all of the IT factors that are going on in the success of Syrians being able to get to Europe and to travel on their own. So it has acted as a pull to other refugee groups that aren't as skilled and don't have the connections and the networks that the Syrians do. And that has drawn more people and made them more vulnerable, because smugglers, it is quite a dangerous business. At some point in the smuggling trip, it often turns to ransom or trafficking. So if it's women, they often get trafficked for a portion of their trip. And many people are aware of this going in. And they, unfortunately, they decide to take that risk. So some migrants or refugees can be held for months at a time and used for sex work. And at that point, it becomes trafficking. So it can go back and forth between smuggling and trafficking. And we do see a lot of ransom now occurring, especially in the eastern route in Africa, where smugglers are not making the money that they used to, and they want to keep making the same amount of money. So they're starting to actually kidnap people and hold them for ransom and force them. So it's turning to trafficking. It's becoming extremely dangerous. So these smuggling lines leave effects on countries that are enduring. One way to avoid it, of course, is to open up possibilities within a country, add an embassy for migration and for refugee applications. So if you have an embassy in Turkey, for example, that is accepting those applications and they don't have to go over the sea, then that's going to avoid that entire smuggling network.